Hi everyone, Dr. Remy from Pain Free and Fit. Today, as per viewer request on our channel, we're going to do a video on how to create the best abdominal exercise routine and workout program for your low back spondylolisthesis pain. Hope you enjoy. So whether it's a new patient that's referred from another doctor, personal trainer, or even an online client that contacts me for information, many people with low back spondylolisthesis pain looking to develop an abdominal routine for themselves are very often misguided and don't understand the customization that's necessary to create the best benefit for their lower back protection. If you're just strengthening the abs without thinking about what your posture and movement issues are, what your stability issues are, I can guarantee you you're only strengthening your ability to place more mechanical stress on your lower back and create more spondylolisthesis pain. Generic rehab programs simply don't compare to a customized program, and the same goes for abdominal training. So today we're going to talk about how to put together a few ideas in developing your own abdominal routine to prevent spondylolisthesis pain and to enhance the stability of your lower back. It begins with an analysis. Now, we don't have time in this video to go over a full body analysis. There's a more in-depth one at the painfreeandfit.com website, but you need to figure out with your spondylolisthesis pain what type of issues in terms of posture and movement tendencies aggravate you. You begin by looking at your posture. Is the pelvis offset as opposed to being neutral, meaning is it laterally translated to one side? Do you have a tendency to hip hike or have one hip come up more than another? Do you have a tendency to lean your rib cage more to one side than another? You may not see this during normal standing analysis in a mirror, but it'll come out during movements such as split squats and lunges, where one hip will come up on one side more than it will another. If that's true, it's compressing that side of the back. It's aggravating the facet joints and the disc fibers on that side. It's overstretching soft tissues on another. That type of asymmetrical force is going on day after day with your repetitive movements, not only in the gym, but during daily activities. And those type of microforces are the #1 reason why mechanical lower back pain, including spondylolisthesis, is aggravated so much. When you're under more load, let's say you're squatting, you have a tendency to have one hip come up or come to the side. You have a tendency to rotate. You have a tendency to have one leg turn outwards more, causing hip hiking on that side. You have a tendency to increase the arch in your back because your abs aren't strong enough to hold your pelvis in a neutral position. Neutral, again, is not a generic term. It's very specific for your ranges of motion that cause pain. At a certain range of motion of tail up or anterior pelvic tilt, low back pain is going to be irritated. At a certain level of posterior pelvic tilting, low back pain may also be irritated. You need to find the exact middle position between there, which is your neutral spine to hold your pelvis in. You need to check out if you have a dominant lat muscle on one side, because we do things many times symmetrically, asymmetrically from one side to another, including gym work. One lat may be stronger or tighter. If it is, it has a tendency to pull on that side of your back, pulling your lumbar spine or your spondylolisthesis vertebra to one side and compressing it on that side. You need to know these things by doing an in-depth analysis, and then with this information, you want to construct an abdominal routine that supports your neutral position, that supports correction of these tendencies. For instance, if I have a big problem with elevating my hip on one side, let's say my right side, and leaning my rib to that side, and I get compressive lower back pain on that right side, when I do my abdominal routine, I don't want to spend a lot of time with side planks with that right side down, because if I do, and I'm exercising my right side down, whether I'm using weight on top of my hip or not, it's the bottom side of the abs and the back muscles that are being exercised with a side plank, not the top. The bottom is contracting strongly. So when I do that, if I'm always doing the right side or equally right side to the left side, I'm developing that same asymmetry. What I need to do, if my tendency is to compress on the right side, is to spend more time with side planking on my opposite side. I need to do more sets, more reps than the other side. It's not that I may not need to do a little on that side, but I need to do much more on the other side to bring symmetry back. If I do that, I'm developing the left side of my abdominal and back muscles, which, if they're stronger, it's going to help me with normal movements using my core to prevent that hip from coming up on the right. If I have strong abdominal and back muscles on that side, it's going to help me bring that other side up. It's going to be to help me to enhance my endurance and my strength training so I can use my core to hold myself in better ways. If I do a front plank and let's say I have a tendency to twist my body to one side, and I'm not aware of using that twist when I do a front plank, I'm going to be much more likely to go into that twist. So let's say I have a tendency to twist my chest more to one side. Perhaps that side of my lat muscle is more dominant and it's helping me to twist to that side. Well, when I do a front plank, I want to set myself up so that I'm twisting my body not to the right with my upper body, but slightly to the left. How would I do that? One way is to move my pelvis to the right side. If I swing my pubic bone to the right, it creates the relationship between my rib cage and my pelvis so that my chest is moving left in relation to my pelvis. So during my front planks, during my, let's say, inverted planks that I do, I want to think about whether I'm training abs or back muscles in any type of core exercise. I want to think about creating a tilt of my pelvis to the opposite side because I can't move my hands unless I bend my right elbow a little bit more, which will help my torso bend to the right. But I'm using these techniques to create a slight counter torque or twist to develop my abs and back muscles to hold myself in a more symmetrical pattern. If not, the more gains I make in my planks, the more gains I make in my crunches or my sit-ups, I'm only going to be strengthening and going to my stronger side, right? I mean, that only makes sense. Our strengths take over, especially later in the set, especially later in the workout when we're tired. It's harder to hold symmetry. So what are we going to do to eke those last few reps out to hold that isometric hold time a little bit more? We're going to go to our strengths, which is if I'm doing crunches, let's say, you're going to notice that my upper body is going to start twisting to that side. So I want to keep these things in mind. I always want to be aware of what my unique tendencies are and then customizing my abdominal program not only with sides in terms of emphasizing one side more than another, but also in terms of my mechanics while I'm doing the exercise. A great abdominal exercise, let's say, are chops, okay, where you're taking the band, you're using a squat, and you're coming down and to the side, okay? Great for the abs. Unfortunately, if you have a problem, let's say, such as hip hiking on my left side where my hip comes up, and let's say I have a tendency to move my torso to the left, what you're going to notice is if you do chops to this side, you're going to be really strong because you're going to be swinging your left hip up and you're going to be twisting your rib cage to that side, and that's creating more of a torque. It's overdeveloping the external obliques on the right side, the internal obliques on the left. It's creating more of that asymmetry so that when you go through life, when you go through your sports and your other fitness maneuvers, you're hip hiking on the left and you're rotating your torso to the left, creating that problem. So to correct that, we would think about doing our chop from the other side more than that side, because on this side, you're going to have more of a tendency to hip hike the right side up, keeping the left side down, which you need because these side of the abdominal muscles are weaker than the other side. And you're going to have more of a tendency to twist your torso to that side. So if for a beginner constructing an abdominal routine using chops, that's what I'd suggest. When someone gets better, it's a matter of holding the pelvis and the rib cage together and moving from the hips so that when you go back to that side and you're chopping, your pelvis, your pubic bone, your belly button, your chest and your nose all rotate together as you come down. And you're focusing on keeping your pelvis and rib cage level so you're not leaning your rib cage to one side or elevating your pelvis. So putting these concepts into play are very important. You could use a great abdominal exercise like a TL hip rotation once you get stronger in your abs to using a sumo stance to rotate to one side. Now, let's say I have a tendency to have my torso twist more to the left than my pelvis. Here, the tendency is keeping my torso to the right and allowing my pelvis to twist more. That's developing all my abdominals, my obliques, my rectus abdominis, even my transversus abdominis, the whole package of the abdominal wall to create symmetry in your movements. That's very essential. So it all begins with an analysis. If you have a tendency to have an anterior pelvic tilt, abs are very important. But if you're doing typical crunches where you're emphasizing the rib cage coming down on the pelvis, that's really serving you not as well as if you thought about the pelvis tilting upwards. Remember, the abdominals attach from your rib cage to your pelvis, okay? So if you're going to crunch forward, like most people do with sit-ups and crunches, they emphasize the upper portion of the body moving upwards, you're not using the abdominals' ability to tilt or posterior tilt the pelvis the way you should. Again, if you're a pain with spondylosis aggravated with extension and tail-up motion, you want to develop the abs ability to tuck the tail under, to raise the pubic bone up. So whatever I'm doing, whether it's a front plank, As opposed to crunching down to highlight the abs with my ribs, I'm going to think about keeping my knees soft and tucking the tail under. Using the abs to pull the pelvis upwards rather than the ribs down, that's strengthening spinal stability because that's going to keep my pelvis in a neutral position, again, like we said before, in a customized position for myself, and avoid when I do activities of that tail moving up. I need to train the endurance of the abdominals as well as the strength. Endurance, I train for high repetitions with low resistance or longer isometric hold times, and I also do sets for strength, meaning greater resistance, heavier bands, doing crunches with a barbell or a plate or a dumbbell on my chest to come up, or a training partner giving me pressure at my shoulders to resist. You want both strength and endurance when developing your abdominal routine. Likewise, if I'm going to do an exercise like a lat pull down or standing lat pull over pull down with either a band or a cable bar, and I am taking a normal stance in a squat and pulling the arms down to the knees. Okay, most people think this is a lat and a pec and a tricep exercise, which it is, but it also trains the abdominals, because if I have a tendency to raise my tail up, I'm going to want to put this kind of exercise into my routine, because what happens is once my hands start elevating up, the typical tendency is for my torso to bend upwards and for me to increase the arch of my lower back on the way up. It's easy to hold my abs and my spine in a pelvic neutral position here as I'm coming down, but as I come up, you're going to notice the low back wants to start arching. So here, I'm training my abdominals eccentrically or lengthening. As my arms come up, I'm thinking of keeping that tail under and a crunch on so I don't have an increased curve in my back. If I want to do leg raises, for instance, and I have a problem with abdominals and increased anterior tilting of the pelvis because my abs are weak and can't hold it there, I want to plug this in, whether I'm doing a single leg raise in any position, okay, or even a double leg raise on the floor where I am holding my hands underneath and raising both legs up. That's a highly dangerous exercise for most people with spondylolisthesis because they don't have the abdominal stability to prevent the lower back from arching. Because as you're raising your legs, you're primarily using the hip flexor muscles to do that, and your abs are working secondarily to stabilize the spine. But if you have weak abs and you have pain with extension or arching your back, you're much better off practicing this with one leg at the beginning, perhaps the other leg bent, which assists in posterior pelvic tilting, and using that to do straight legs or circles or Pilates hundreds with a single leg as opposed to a double leg. Again, emphasizing that tail under. If I'm doing that and I have a tendency to hip hike, I want to make sure I'm holding that hip down. If I'm doing those exercises and I have a tendency to rotate my pelvis to one side or my chest, I want to make sure that I'm correcting that. If I'm doing those exercises and my latissimus muscles, which is helping to stabilize my spine, are contracting more on my right side because that's my dominant lat, I want to learn how to contract my left lat so I have symmetry. So you're getting the idea. Whenever we're doing abdominal work, it really doesn't matter which exercise we're choosing in terms of an overall routine, but it matters very much which exercise we're choosing in terms of our specifics for our specific corrections and our weaknesses. So you want to choose exercises that target your corrections that you need. You want to choose exercises asymmetrically if you have an asymmetrical problem, doing them to one side only sometimes, or load it up with more repetitions and more sets on one side if that's your weaker side to bend to or to rotate to. You want to choose exercises that challenge your ability with your abs to hold certain postures like anterior pelvic tilting, like leaning to the side and rotating. The more you start putting these concepts together with your abdominal training, the safer your lower back will be, and you'll find that your ab workouts do support your spondylolisthesis and help to prevent your lower back pain. If you like this video on designing your ab routine for your spondylolisthesis, feel free to subscribe to our channel. Got a lot of great videos out there to help you. Questions or comments, write in. As always, I'll do my best to answer. And remember, if you're looking for a great program to figure out what your analysis is of your mechanics, your posture, your movement tendencies as it relates to your spondylolisthesis pain, check out our Fast Track program for spondylolisthesis available at painfreeandfit.com. And of course, I'm always available through Zoom for online video consultations to help you figure out either your analysis or the directions you need to go with your home spondylolisthesis exercise program. Hope you enjoyed this video on ab training and designing a program based on your unique mechanics for spondylolisthesis pain.